Hello everyone, it's Raleigh and welcome to the channel. We're about a week away from the release of Visions of Eternity, and things are ramping up, I think. We've been getting a lot of info on the game in little snippets. They've been releasing a lot of little shorts and giving us little hints here and there. I have done a theory video and I've talked about how I wanted to do more. And I did talk about last week how I wanted to do one this week, depending on what we were going to see the rest of the week. So I sat down, I wrote down a couple more theories that I have about Visions of Eternity and Castora and like the whole thing, right? And so I just wanted to make this video to, you know, as a final little, here's a few more theories that not just myself, but other people in the community have come up with. And then we'll be in the expansion shortly anyways, and we're going to see how these theories are, you know, working out for us. So I'm very excited. So let's kind of talk about some of the stuff that we've already talked about and continue kind of talking about some of these things. So one of the things that I've mentioned before, and I don't know if I did this in a video or if this was on a live stream or something, but we've talked about Orestes and Darda. Now, Orestes and Darda were two of the leading Mursat in Bavanissos when the Mursat were still like this big civilization on Tyria and stuff, and they were. We see a lot of their like journal entries and you know the missives back and forth between each other, where they talked about like the younger generations like Manichaeus and Optimus and Lazarus and all of them, like how they've been doing, how they started focusing a lot on the Flameseeker prophecies and all these things, like right before the fall of Bavanissos and the Titan invasion, things like that. But we also got this really interesting piece of information where they decided that they wanted to go west, go past the Horn of Maguma, and leave this land behind. And this was after the Titans had invaded Bavanissos and had destroyed the city and things like that. And they in this message they said that they're not going to wait to see if there's other survivors. They're just done with it because, like I said earlier, they were already kind of done with all the things that the Mursat were doing. They weren't okay with the Bloodstone experiments they were doing, especially on their own people, let alone, you know, the White Mantle and all these other innocent people. They were never behind that. These two were kind of, they didn't really want to engage with the Flameseeker prophecies and all these things. They wanted to focus on going back to Nios, and that was like a big focus of theirs. And it was kind of, that's where a lot of the Mursat were kind of split, because a lot of them focused on the Flameseeker prophecies and that stuff, and trying to survive those. And the other part of the Mursat, they were trying to get back home to Nios. And it was just kind of like this, they were kind of split a little bit on that. But so these two decided after the Titans invaded that they wanted to, that they're going out west. And I think ArenaNet is doing something really interesting here, because I think the Mursat as a race have been very interesting for a lot of people. I think many of the elder races have been very interesting to a lot of the people. And after we were done with the elder dragons, I think ArenaNet said, okay, you know what, let's explore the elder races a little bit more and kind of give them, you know, expand a little bit on them, give them some more history, you know, bring them back into the story in some shape or form. And they did that. With Seekers of the Obscure, we got most of the elder races kind of coming back to the forefront. You know, we talked about, we saw Iskaran as a seer, Mabon as a Mursat, we saw Dagda as a Jotun, we saw Lear as a dwarf, as a non-stone dwarf, and things like that. So they kind of came back to the spotlight. But I think that with Mabon's death and like those types of things happening, you know, Janthia Wild's kind of wrapping up the story on the White Mantle and the Mursat, like in general. I think the consensus, I feel like this is what I'm kind of gathering, is that ArenaNet wanted to leave the door open to like, hey, there are other Mursat out there, right? They dropped a couple of hints about that there are other survivors that have kind of just spread around the world that didn't want to stick around in central Tyria. But then specifically, they mentioned Orestes and Darda going out west. So now that we know the location of Castora, which is this very large island to the west of Central Tyria, I think we can maybe assume that we're gonna see Aresta Zendarda out on Castora. I mean, we might, right? So let's kind of theorize a little bit on what could have happened. The way that I could see it, because we also talked about how Castora could be the homeland of the Seers, right? We had the Mersad and Seer war, and we know where the Mersad were hailing from Bava Nisos. Yes, they weren't originally from Tyria, they came from Nios, but their main civilization on Tyria was on Bava Nisos, was on the Isles of Jainthir. And we knew this for a very long time. But we don't know where the Seers hailed from. We have never seen a Seer city. We've never heard about where they came from, their civilization. We really don't know much about them. So we talked about how there's a statue of a Seer on Castora that's seen in one of the trailers, and a lot of people were theorizing maybe that's the homeland of the Seers, and that's why, because ArenaNet wants to talk about the Elder Races, we're going back, we're going to Castora, and we're going back pretty much and talking about the Seers this time around. But we could also have still the Mersad in the story. I think because the Mersad were so popular, they could be in the story. So what if Aresta Zendarda, after the Titans invaded Bava Nisos, went to Castora and pretty much pleaded with whatever Seers still were there. We think the Seers are extinct, but I have a feeling that on Castora, hidden away on Castora, there are still Seers that didn't partake in this fight, that didn't partake in the war with the Mersad, and they hid away. They said, we can't, we're almost extinct, there's only a few of us left, and we don't want to risk any more engagement with the Elder Dragons, because the last time we tried to do that, we ended up just getting into war with another race, and we want to hide away, we just don't want to deal with it. Maybe Aresta Zendarda went there and found the remaining Seers and said, we're at your mercy, we give up, we don't want to fight, we never wanted to fight you guys, but this was, a decision that was made, just happened, because it was two civilizations clashing or whatever, and we got mad at each other, but we're at your mercy, we just want to hang out, live out our days with you guys, we have no intentions of fighting you. And maybe they were accepted into the Seer society, whatever is left of it, right? Maybe they're friends now. Maybe we go there and the Seers are now friends with the rest of Zendarda, and they're just part of their civilization, and just hang out, kind of like how Isgarn and Maban, during the war, also kind of, Isgarn spared Maban and was like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, join me, we'll work together. So maybe they did the same thing here. And so maybe when we go to Castora, when, Visions of Eternity releases, maybe we'll see them out there. Maybe we'll see a little bit of the Seers, a little bit of the Mersad, and maybe we're going to see a different side to them, right? We got a little bit of a hint to their peaceful side, of the Mersad's peaceful side, as we went to Mistburn Barrens and Bava Nisos, but we only really heard stories, but we never really saw that. But it'd be really cool to see maybe a peaceful society. Maybe they've completely given up. They're still super powerful magical beings, but maybe they said, you know what? We don't really want to deal with this. We don't want to be part of whatever's happening on Tyria, and we're just going to live our peaceful days out here. And so, yeah, so maybe that was one of the theories that I kind of had, was that I think there was this idea, because I feel like when Jainthir Wilds came out, they already knew we were going to go to Castora, maybe. I feel like by that point, specifically when they added something like the letter that we found on Mount Belrior that says that Aresta Zendarda are going out west, that they knew we were going to Castora, which was out west, right? And so I think this could be a big possibility, that we see the two of them out there, and I think that would be really, really cool. So that was one of the theories. The other one, I kind of wanted to talk about this. So ArenaNet has been releasing these shorts, right? And at first, these shorts were all about the Inquest, and they gave us details about the Inquest, and I'll touch on that a little bit too. But the thing is, one of the ones that they just released, they released one today, and then they released one the other day. I don't remember. But the one they released today, a few hours ago, as I'm recording this, they talked about how the headline was, "Is Castora cursed?" or "What is the curse of Castora?" or something like that, right? And it talked about how the stormy seas is the reason, the Elder Dragons and the stormy seas is the reason why we haven't been able to access Castora. Which, yes, some people might say, you know, it's a little iffy, and I agree on that because it's such a massive island. So how can there be stormy seas all around that island? You know, it's kind of weird to think that it was non-existent, even though it was on on all the world maps. But then the only reason we couldn't go there is because of the stormy seas. But that doesn't make an island non-exist. Like, people thinking that the island doesn't exist. It was kind of weird, and it kind of seems like I think we need to get more info on it to really understand the concept that is Castora, like the island that is Castora. How does it fit into the world, and what's the history and the story behind it, really truly, right? We need to get some first-hand accounts. Maybe Saida has some insight into how the Corsairs have been avoiding that island, or why some people thought it was non-existent. I feel like we still haven't gotten an explanation to that. And the idea is that a lot of people have been theorizing that it was shielded off or warded off in some shape or form. Some people were saying that it was shielded by the Inquest, right? And like it was kind of maybe cloaked by the Inquest, and that's why people couldn't find it. My theory was that it was a magical being like another Mersat, maybe Orestes Darda, one of the seers, whatever, put a veil on it, put a ward on it, like Mabon did with Bavanisos and the island that Bavanisos sat on. So, you know, it kind of seems like that's not the case here, because they're saying that the only reason people haven't been able to get there is because of the stormy, raging seas around it, as well as the Elder Dragons, which kind of makes sense, and it's something that I haven't considered until I actually saw that short and it kind of clicked with me. Because remember, you guys, there's so many stories out there, specifically when you read Sea of Sorrows, which was the third book that ArenaNet released before Guild Wars 2 came out, but we hear the stories about how there was an undead armada, an armada of dead ships. Like Zaitan had a fleet of dead ships at its disposal, and that it made traveling around Ore, which if you were traveling from the major port that is Lion's Arch, if you were traveling from there all the way to Castora, you would have to go by Ore, right? And they kind of made it seem like it was impossible. That was one of the reasons why we never got to Alona, is because it was, or Cantha, is because the sea travel south was cut off because of the rise of Ore and the undead ships that were there, the dead ships of Ore. And there's a lot of stories about this, and I even myself have made videos. If you watch my intro series to the lore that I have, I specifically numerous times talk about it when I talked about the Sea of Sorrows, and I talked about Ore, and about how that was like sea travel was impossible because of the ships there. So now it kind of makes a little bit of sense there that now people would be venturing further out and we would be accessing this island. It's just, I think one thing that myself and other people have been getting hung up on is the idea that some people thought it was non-existent, even though it has been on the world map for a long time. No one has really talked about Castora, but it's also not been like described as this magical place at any point in time. So it's just kind of strange, and we'll have to see how that really all plays out. But I think the idea still is there that there's really something mysterious going on with Castora in general. We not only have the raging storms, which makes me think a little bit, so for those of you that have played it or are playing it currently or whatever, New World, right? New World Eternum it takes place on the island of Eternum, which is supposed to be this like this mysterious island that has some kind of treasure on it or whatever, right? But it's surrounded constantly by a storm, and no one can really reach it unless you can get through that storm or whatever, and it's being caused by like the angry earth and whatever, blah blah blah. But the thing is that it kind of reminds me of that, right? It reminds me of like that there's a constant storm around this island, and so no one has been able to really get there. How we get there? I mean, in the trailer it kind of shows that the Corsair ships, Saida's ships, are going through the stormy seas I'm guessing that's probably going to be the intro cinematic in some shape or form there. I'm not sure, but that's what it looks like we're doing. We're not using an airship to go, which is probably more dangerous to do anyways, but nonetheless, it looks like we're traveling through these raging seas to get there. But there's not just that, but there's also the idea, one of the shorts they released talked about the ancient dangers, and it's filled with monsters, and how the arrival of the Inquest was tipping like the scales of power because of the supplies and the magic and the technology and stuff. Like the arrival of that would like tip the scales, and it almost sounds like that there's some kind of struggle going on. Right? Is it specifically a struggle between the Inquest and whoever the native people are of Castora, or is there something more going on? Is there something that's been happening for a long time? Because when we talk about ancient dangers, again, it reminds me a little bit of the Elder Races. Is there still something going on there? Or could it have something to do? This was another theory. This might be very far-fetched, but I did want to bring that up. Was the idea that there's something in the unending ocean. Right? So we know that before Suwan came up from the unending ocean, from the bottom of the unending ocean, she was keeping something at bay. And this is something that gets hinted at by multiple sources and multiple different instances that we kind of hear a little bit about this. There was Magister Ella McKay, who we dealt with when it came to Scarlet. She was one of the main Magisters, main people that we talked to from the Dermot Priory when the whole Scarlet situation was happening. But during End of Dragons, we actually meet Magister Ella McKay out in New Kainang, and she talks about how she actually studied the crate before she studied Scarlet, before she kind of dealt with all of that. And she said that it was always believed that the deep sea dragon was the cause of whatever's happening in the unending ocean, that there's some kind of darkness and shadows and tentacled horrors that were described to exist in the unending ocean, and it was always believed that it was the deep sea dragon that was causing this. But then, based off of what's been happening, meaning that Suwan came to the surface to save Kantha from the tsunami that was caused by the rise of ore, that now this darkness, these shadows, these tentacle horrors are actually, they were pushed back by Suwan and are now kind of getting freed again. And this was something that Kuno Vang actually mentions a little bit as well, that there's these shadows in the depths. And there's also, this is in conjunction to when we fight the Leviathan, right? So whenever the Leviathans appear, both in End of Dragons and Janthia Wilds, whenever we fight the Leviathan, specifically actually in End of Dragons, we hear Alargos talking about how there's this like darkness coming from the ocean, and it's bringing, the Leviathan is bringing this darkness, or the other way around. Like somehow they're connected, the Leviathans are connected to this darkness that lurks in the deep ocean. And so there's this idea that there is still something out in the deep ocean that isn't the deep sea dragon. We know that the deep sea dragon was Suwan, and that many people have mistaken her to be this horror that drove both the crate and the Quaggan, and that's where Magister Ella McKay kind of comes from. She talks about how they were driven to the surface, the crate, the Quaggan, the Largos, and the Karka, but that they were driven by something in the unending ocean, and it was always believed to be the deep sea dragon, but actually Suwan is this kind, creature that was never really, until the very end of Dragons, was never really corrupted by the void and never actually went evil. So there's still this mystery out there. So could this, whatever this entity or whatever this force is that's in the deep ocean, could this be causing the raging seas around Castora? Could there be some kind of connection? Because there could be, and we could kind of weave it into theory where we could say, well, they wanted to shield Castora from outside forces because whatever is in the unending ocean wants all that magic. We know that Castora is very potent in magic. There's a lot of like ambient magic around. It's a ley line nexus, right? There's a lot of like ambient magic and like just a ton of magic. And magic on Tyria, the magic in the world of Guild Wars always means power, right? And so if it wanted to grow more power, if it wanted to become more powerful, it would want to take whatever's in the ocean, would want to take hold of that, right? So could that be a struggle that's going on? Is there maybe something going on with the unending ocean and the darkness that's in the unending ocean that's maybe trying to take a hold of what's on Castora, and maybe they're fighting with the Inquest to be the first one to grab whatever, like whatever is at the center there or something, right? Like take hold of that true, you know, center of Castora that is where all the power is held, right? So there's kind of this interesting theory, I think, that you could make where, you know, there is no ward around it, but the raging seas makes me kind of think of something like that it has something to do with water in some shape or form, you know. But yeah, that was another theory. Then let's go back to the Inquest a little bit. And so the Inquest, it's interesting because the ArenaNet hasn't really talked about the Inquest until they started last week, and we talked about a little bit about the shorts that they've released. And at first, when I made the video last week, there was only 3 shorts out, and then they released more and more of them. And then with the shorts, I thought the shorts were just going to be about the Inquest until they release a blog post about the Inquest. That's how I would have personally set that up, but it doesn't look like it, because then they started releasing shorts about other information concerning Castora, and it kind of went away from being about the Inquest. So but we did get a couple of really interesting things that made other people on the Discord server, we've been talking a ton about that, but a lot of people have been thinking about what that means and what that could, you know, ultimately lead into. And there was a couple of people that actually had this interesting theory where at first I was like, I don't know if I'm a big fan of this. But then as I thought about it and as these shorts were coming out, I'm like, this actually makes a lot of sense. So let me talk first about the shorts a little bit. So the shorts were about the Inquest and, you know, kind of describing them a little bit and talking, maybe hinting at what the ultimate goal is. So one of the shorts talked about how the Inquest some of the Inquests believe that organic life is insufficient and that they need to use technology to improve it, or, you know, that they need to use magic and technology. Like, that's the next power step, right? It's like organic life is inefficient, so we got to do inorganic, like, create things out of machinery and magic and whatever, right? And like that is the next step of evolution or whatever, right? And to that end, in that same short, they showed off the raptors, right? The raptors that they have experimented on, which are the organic life on the Castora, but they use their technology, their cybernetic stuff, right? And it, you know, modified them and like added guns to them, and it was very like it reminded me a little bit of like Digimon, right? Where certain Digivolutions, and it's a joke that has persisted in the Digimon community for a long time, but it's like, you know, this kind little creature turns into this like gun-wielding maniac or whatever, right? And many Digimon can digivolve into different things, but it's a common theme in a lot of Digivolutions that they turn from like dinosaurs or whatever organic creatures into like metal creatures. Like they get enhanced with having like claws made out of metal, or guns made out of metal, or an armor made out of metal, and like all this stuff, right? And they get kind of like mechanized in a way, right? And so that kind of reminded me of that a little bit, right? Because they almost are evolving these raptors into these mecha versions of themselves. And so on the Discord server, a couple of people actually had this thought as well, where they said, well, what if ArenaNet, or what if the ArenaNet, if the Inquest are trying to create their own mecha elder dragon, aka almost like the like mecha Godzilla, right? If you take Godzilla as a creature, which technically, if you think about it, Godzilla, you know, as a creature could be like an elder dragon, right? It's this super powerful force of nature that just comes and destroys and whatever, right? That's how the elder dragons were originally kind of described. And you know, in many of the movies and the comics and stuff like that, they created Mecha Godzilla to match that power in order to defend against Godzilla's attacks on Japan and stuff. And it was like they created this cybernetic version of Godzilla that they called Mecha Godzilla, and it had its own little powers that were supposed to rival Godzilla. And so it's really interesting to think to take that thought process, because it actually makes sense when we look at the evidence that we have seen, because we have also a short about Kuda, right? So who is Kuda? So Kuda she's called Overseer Kuda, and she is implied to be the daughter of Kudu, who in the personal story was, in a way, the predecessor to Zoja, being the original prodigy and Snaf's assistant, right? And like Snaf was his mentor before Snaf mentored Zoja. And so he continued, because the thing with Snaf was, if you guys watch my history of the Inquest video, he studied the dragon energies, the elder dragon energies, and the magics and stuff, and he realized that they all had their own signature energies. And he left that Snaf left that research alone because he said they were too wild to really do anything with. And we know now later on like why this is, right? But he kind of left that research and was like, no, these are like, you can't really control them, and it's just too dangerous to use these energies. But then Kudu kind of left Snaf and said, no, you know what, I'm going to continue this research. And so in the personal story, Zoja is after him and tries to stop him, and eventually does. But before that happens, in the Infinity Coil reactor, he actually creates this minion, this organic minion, champion, of where he puts together a bunch of the dragon energies and puts it into this risen giant. And this risen giant now has all these different energies inside of him. And even Kudu himself, he corrupts himself. And so you have to defeat him and his creature that he creates. And then when you go into the explorable, you find Subject Alpha, which again was another one, was this almost like a horror movie villain that just like pops out of nowhere and attacks you and is almost like invincible or whatever. And so you kind of deal with that, which that is pretty much the pinnacle of the research that Kudu established before we killed him, right? And so Kudu actually did all this research because he wanted to create Elder Dragon champions that only he could control, right? And so then in season 4, we find out that Kuda took over this research. You know, again, it's implied because of the names and that she continued his research, that she is his daughter. And so Kuda takes over, creates Subject Beta, which is kind of based off of Subject Alpha, and creates, again, combines these dragon energies in different ways, and kind of uses us almost like a test subject, where she sends Subject Beta after us in an attempt to kind of like test out these experiments that she has been doing, right? If we go with the thought process that some Inquest think organic life isn't sufficient, and that they want to, as Kuda kind of has been showing, they want to use the Elder Dragon energies to create a powerful champion, we could kind of combine these two ideas, thinking that maybe they're creating a cybernetic version of the Elder Dragons, or at least one of them, and they're building, because it's not organic, right? Maybe one of the reasons why Kudu's research failed, and why Kuda's research maybe failed, and what she maybe is deviating from now, is the idea that they used organic matter in their experiments. And now they're moving away from that because they're like, well, it's really hard to control that. It's really hard to control these organic creatures that we're creating, so why don't we create a mechanized version of an Elder Dragon? We create this giant robot, in a way, and then pump that full of these energies, but we still control it because it's made out of, metal and, technology, and we can control that technology by force, right? And so maybe that's what the Raptor research is kind of leaning into, because again, Raptors could be in a way related to Elder Dragons in the in the world of Tyria, because these are both like lizardy kind of things, right? When you think of a dragon, you think it's a lizard with wings kind of thing, a big lizard with wings, right? So there's maybe this idea where they're using this research that they've done on the Raptors, but on a larger scale, maybe, right? Where they're like, okay, so instead of like just modifying this creature, and we don't have any Elder Dragons, we don't know where Oreen is, we can now maybe mechanize, or not mechanize, but create this mechanized version of Oreen and make that our Elder Dragon that we control. So that's one of the theories. I didn't come up with this. This was like other people on the Discord server that came up with that, and I thought it was really, really cool. Once we started getting the shorts, and it actually made sense, because I was like, okay, that kind of combines a lot of the things they're hinting at, right? That's a lot of the research, and that would be almost a natural progress of like thought process if you go through that, right? It's a progress through the thought of, okay, how do we create an Elder Dragon? And right, if you run into the idea of maybe they're too hard to control because they go out, you know, we know that the Elder Dragons were corrupted by the Void and all these things, right? And they were corrupted by the magics that they were like consuming. And so maybe they realized this now that all the Elder Dragons are gone and stuff, and they were like, well, you know, how do we avoid that situation with the creatures that we're creating, that we want to control, that we want to take over the world with? Well, just create a mechanized version. Create your own Mecha Godzilla, right? Mecha Oreen, right? So maybe we'll see that in the story. Maybe that is something that they're going to create, and maybe that's part of it as well. Again, I talked a little bit about New World Eternum, right? And it's kind of the idea that there's the angry earth fighting back against the corruption that's like on there or whatever, and it's this weird, I don't know too much about the lore, I've only really dove into it a little bit, but it's this everlasting war that's been going on forever, because time works differently on Eternum, and it's these forces fighting against each other, right? And it could be the same thing here, where we could see the forces of Castora, these monsters that innately live there, right, that are native to Castora, might be fighting against the Inquest. That could be something that we see as well. The reason I say that is because in one of the raid encounters, or in one of the pictures that we've seen where they talked about the raid encounters, we've seen that like weird purple bird creature thing that has like a tree growing out of its head and something and stuff. Like, we don't know what the relation there is. It has like these cool wings and stuff. We don't know what the relation is there, but maybe this is this is something where like the whatever faction is on Castora or something is fighting back against the Inquest or something, and that's one of the creatures there or something like that. I don't know, but I just think the idea of what the Inquest is doing, I think like the two people, there's two people specifically that on separate occasions said this, and I know they weren't. It was just something that they came up with. I want to say Schyloe was one of them, and then Mish was the other one, but I want to say, I'm not 100% certain, but it was on the Discord, definitely on the Discord server, that a couple of people said that. And like I said, at first I was like, that's kind of weird, but now I'm like, you know what? Now with all the shorts and working through that thought, I'm like, I could definitely see that. So, and then let's talk a little bit about Castora and what is on Castora, who could be on Castora. So we talked about the seers, right? But one of the things, and I just mentioned Schyloe. So Schyloe is a creative partner for ArenaNet, and she has been, we've been sitting down, the two of us, and kind of been talking back and forth about different theories. And she has a ton of really, really great theories. And I'll link her stuff. I'll put a picture up, and I'll link her stuff down below so you guys can check out all the things she's been doing. But she has all these amazing theories about just the gods and all this different, and it's just been really cool talking to her about all this. But the thing is that one of the things that she brought up was the ruins that we've seen on Castora are like Orien ruins, right? And so she was thinking, okay, is this related in some shape or form with the gods, right? And like maybe this purple creature that we saw with the wings, right? And there's this idea of, she actually had a really cool like name association where she talked about like the name Castora has like a meaning and stuff like that, and she dove really deep into all of that. But it was really cool where, but the main point of it is that, these ruins are Orien, right? And so that's kind of the main crux of that I'm trying to get at is, does it mean that Oriens lived on Castora at some point, at some point, like did they venture out, because we know that they landed on Or, the humans, and then they spread to Tyria and Kryda, right? or to I'm sorry, to Krita and Ascalon and colonize there. But did they also venture to Castora, right? Like, did they go out that way as well? We don't know, because the thing also is, someone might say, well, you know, the Orient ruins, they probably washed up on there after ore was brought back up from the depths of the ocean, right, by Zaitan. But the thing is, every time we've seen these ruins, they haven't been out on the beach. They've been out on the main land, like in the jungle part of it, right? They haven't been on the sandy beaches where they're just like washed up on the beach. No, these are on the island itself, like in the deeper part of it. So meaning that someone had built them, right? And there's a couple of really interesting pictures that it's kind of strange because they're very Orient, but they're also, they kind of remind me a little bit of Exalted, a little bit of Tarir and like the exalted ruins that we see out in the Silverways and stuff like that, like before they became the Exalted, right? There's all these ruins and stuff like that. But it kind of makes me think of that architecture a little bit as well, which again, remember, the Exalted were created by the Forgotten, right? And like that was the whole thing. The Forgotten did a ritual to these to the first generation of Zephirites or whatever, and they went through this ritual to become the Exalted. They were like these humans that became the Exalted. And so that's kind of, it kind of leans into, again, the elder races. Do we have Forgotten as well as Orients on Castora, right? Like, who is on Castora? Who was the who is the civilization that built these? Is it Orients? Was it the human gods? We know the human gods ventured throughout Tyria because they collected the mystic telescope of the Jotun and the Bloodstone, right? They had the reliquaries where they put all of their different artifacts and stuff like that. So they ventured around the world. Did they go to Castora at some point? Did they take humans with them to Castora to create these ruins and stuff? So this is like a lot of the stuff that we've been kind of theorizing on when it comes to who is on Castora. Because one of the shorts also talked about that, you know, and I mentioned that earlier, is like that the technology of the Inquest and the supplies and all of this stuff is tipping the scales. But it's like, okay, well, what's going on? If you're tipping the scale of a fight or a war, right, there's two sides to it. So who's the other side? Like, is the Inquest fighting something, like another faction? Is there, who is out there? Or is that referring to us, like coming there, and like, you know, maybe the Astral Ward has a camp out there or something like that, you know? So we don't really know, but it's very interesting that there's ruins out there that someone had built at some point, right? And they look Orient, and one of the pictures actually looks Orient combined with Exalted / Forgotten architecture. That kind of makes me think of a little bit of Guild Wars Utopia. If you guys don't know, Guild Wars Utopia was this expansion for Guild Wars 1 that was canceled, that was supposed to take place in the Mists, and it was supposed to lean a little bit more on the like God story and stuff like that. And it was supposed to be taking place on this mysterious island. And there's a bunch of concept art, and they didn't get too far into making that because then they took a lot of these ideas and made Eye of the North, which was the expansion that led into Guild Wars 2. The idea was that they canceled Utopia because they wanted to Guild Wars 2, and then instead made Eye of the North to bridge Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2. That was kind of the thing, right? But it reminds me a lot of these pictures that we see, and they're not concept art, but they're pictures that remind me of concept art from Utopia specifically. And I'll put up a couple of pictures in comparison, and you guys will kind of see what I'm talking about, because they look a little, the pictures that we see from Visions of Eternity look a little almost like Mesoamerica influence, which was supposed to be a big theme of Utopia as well. It was supposed to be Mesoamerica, meaning like Aztec and Mayan and that kind of stuff, right? And that kind of like architecture and those ideas. So again, it's really interesting to kind of think about that. The final thing that I want to bring up, which I don't have a theory on, but I just want to bring that up, is in those pictures as well, you will see that, and we also have actually seen this in the trailer of Visions of Eternity, is there's this weird like corruption that's like seeping into the ruins, or that's throughout these ruins and the lab and these things that we see, where we see Seb standing at the end of the trailer. There's this like weird corruption, and it looks almost like it's a modified version of the like astral background that we get with a lot of the Mist story. So whenever we see like the Mist Gate, for example, it has this like astral background, right? When we see gates to the mists and stuff, it always has this weird starry background that looks like it's just like looks like you're looking at the cosmos or whatever, right? And so we have something like that as well, but it looks different. It doesn't look the same, and it doesn't look like a regular like corruption of like an elder dragon or something. It doesn't look like Brand or anything like that, but it just looks like there's something going on with like magic or the mists or something that's seeping into the world in some shape or form. And I don't know what the deeper meaning of it is, but I feel like there's something very interesting at the center of that story that will be told with Visions of Eternity, and probably with later updates with the other maps that we get and stuff. So I did want to point that out to you guys, and see what you guys think this could mean. I don't really know. There's like a billion different ways we could take that little corruption, like that little, it looks like a type of corruption, or like it's like a tear in reality almost, or something like that, where like it's a Mistgate that's spreading or something. It's like this tear that is just kind of ripping a hole in reality or something like that, and it's kind of like the outlying edges of it or something like that. I don't know, but like I said, I'll put up those pictures for you guys, and you guys can let me know. So those are kind of the theories that I have thought about, that I wanted to bring to your guys' attention, talk about a little bit, because we are getting close to the release of the expansion, and I feel like we haven't really talked that much about the location. And I know there's some people that said, well, we got plenty of information, which, if you think that you got enough information, that's great. But I really think that with Secrets of the Obscure and Jade Wilds, we got a lot more info before we went into it, which made the whole thing very much more intriguing, because I don't know. I just don't have any information. Like, I'm super excited for the expansion, but I don't know what to be excited about, if that makes any sense. So I'm like, okay, let me just make all these theories, right? I didn't really want to make these theories baseless, but I sat down, and with the little hints that we got, with the little things that a lot of us have been talking about, I wanted to sit down, make some more theories. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you guys think. I want to hear you guys' thoughts. I want to hear what your guys' theories are. Doesn't matter how crazy you think it is. It doesn't matter. I just want to hear it all, because I want to see where everyone is with their thoughts on this. Because remember guys, this is the first time in the world of Guild Wars 2 that we're going to a location that we've never heard about, that we've never seen or heard about. Okay, this is a brand new place that ArenaNet has like a blank canvas that they could do anything with, right? And so I really want to see what you guys think, what your guys' theories are on where we're gonna go, what's gonna happen there, and what ArenaNet is gonna bring to the table here, right? Like, I'm really, really curious to see this. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to support the channel, I have links down below. If you guys want to, we have a merch store. You guys can become members for the YouTube channel. I have super chats available, all these things. If you guys want to support the channel, I would really, really appreciate it. Also, there is the free-to-play link down below. If you guys are new to Guild Wars 2 and you want to try it out, make sure to use that free-to-play link. You can play the base game for free up until max level. There's a ton of content there. It helps me out a ton if you use any of those links. The other link down there, both of which are sponsored by ArenaNet, but the other one is my if you buy any expansion, if you're buying any of the expansions, use that link down below. It'll bring you to the buy page, and I like to explain this to people because there's a lot of confusion every time. It just brings you simply to the buy page. It's not like I have a special page on the ArenaNet store or Guild Wars 2 store or whatever, but it just, using that specific link that I have in my description, tells them that any expansion that you buy or whatever, I get the credit that you used my link. That tells ArenaNet if you're using that specific link. So I would really, really appreciate anyone that uses those. Merch store, I'm gonna try to update if I can. I did add a couple of new things a month or two ago, but I do want to add some more stuff as well. But yeah, anyways, I will be back with some more. I'll be streaming the expansion release. I'll be live Tuesday and Wednesday is the plan as of right now. As always, I'm going to do the first map on Tuesday and the second map on Wednesday. Usually I split them up in two. We do the story the story that takes place on map 1 on Tuesday, and then the story that the rest of the story that takes place on the second map, day 2, and then we'll do like whatever meta events and achievements, and we'll talk about how I feel about everything and theories and stuff like that. I also want to do Halloween in Guild Wars 1. I'm working right now on my Guild Wars 1 Halloween character. I've never done Halloween in Guild Wars 1. I really want to do that as well. I'm going to be streaming that with you guys, and I'll probably put an announcement out on Discord for that. Join the Discord. Speaking of, it's been growing. There's a ton more people, but I'd love to see more people, more theories, all this stuff. It's been growing and it's been really great, and I love having all you guys there and talking about all this stuff, even though I don't always respond, but I do read all of it, so I will say that. But it's super cool, so if you guys want to hang out on there, and yeah, that's gonna be pretty much it. So if you guys enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't, and share with your friends, talk to your friends about what you think, and come up with your own theories, and I want to hear them. So anyways, that'll be it for me for today. I appreciate you guys so much, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, bye guys.